Defensive coordinator Tony White helped Nebraska have a top 10 rushing defense the last 2 years. No offense to the Cornhuskers, but they don't have players like Daniel Lyons, Darrell Jackson Jr., and all the transfers the Noles brought in on the defensive front. Why couldn't the Noles have that kind of year this season?
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football writer and recruiting analyst. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com. Today is one of my favorite subjects. I'm very excited about it. I hope you are too. We're getting to talk about three-man defensive front, Florida State's talent up front. It matches. This is so rare, so rare. When you go from a four to a three-man line, it usually really sucks the first season. Florida State's the exception to the rule. Darrell Jackson, Daniel Lyons, Terrance White, just KJ Sampson. They have so many big bodies. It's Jamari Flagg. They have an enormous amount of guys that are over 280. And then they added three guys from the portal that'll play down, plus maybe James Williams play a little bit of down too. Florida State is loaded up front. There is no excuse. If you take nothing else away from this podcast, there is no excuse for Florida State not to have a top 25 rushing defense this upcoming season. I am 100% steadfast with that. They should be a really good rushing defense. I honestly don't care what the numbers were last season. That defensive staff is gone. The defensive style is gone. There's a big onus on Darrell Jackson from himself, I'm sure, to play better, to increase his draft stock. You have guys coming back in the secondary and at the second level. They're hoping and trying to motivate these guys because it makes their job easier. There's no reason, none, for Florida State not to have a better defense this next year. I have a lot of faith in Coach White. And as I mentioned in the opening, this three-man front that they ran at Nebraska, no offense to the Huskers, they're not going to have as many big bodies, as athletic as the Noles are. And again, they stole James Williams away from them. You can call it whatever you want, but he transferred over to be with his coach. Pot Rose came with him. They got Coach Coop in the back. It will be a very cohesive unit compared to many others. Now, I know myself and many other people are like, okay, Brian, you know what? First year, it's hard to install a scheme and be a successful group. I say that all the time on this show, any other show I go on, because it's typically true. But that's why you look up the stats. Here's something to give you a little bit of a hint. When Nebraska hired Coach White, he was there in 23 and 24. Both years, they were top 10 nationally in rushing defense. But this is the bigger part of it. When I'm looking at like the depth chart and the numbers and everything, I'm looking at these big bodies that Florida State has, and I know Nebraska doesn't have them, but at the same time, Nebraska's defense in 2022, they sucked the year before he got there. Shocker. I mean, they just haven't been the same program for a long time. They gave up 189 yards on the ground. Terrible. They weren't in the top 100. They were like 108th or something. That still shouldn't happen in Nebraska, but it did. The very next season, Pot Roast and all those guys come in, and they did a good job. They motivated the kids, and hats off to the program for improving, but all the way to 92.9 yards per game, they cut it by over half. And then the next season, in 2024, against a little more difficult schedule as the Big Ten adjusted, Nebraska still held serve. They were one of the best rush defenses in the country. 101.2 yards per game. So I ask all Florida State fans right here, right now, with a depth chart that has Big Darrell probably starting at nose. I'm sure he'll move around, and I'll get into the depth chart a little more. KJ Sampson, this will be his third year in the program. He's one of the lighter guys that's athletic at nose guard, 6'3", 310, 305, something like that. You'll have Kevin Wynn coming in. He's 320 to 340 range. He's one of the most rare nose guards. You got Jamari Flagg. You got Denace White. You got 5 guys right there. 5 that can play the always important nose guard spot. And then you still got Daniel Lyons, Deontay McCray, Jason Jenkins, Diamante Diggs, James Williams, Amari Williams up front in some way, shape, or form. They have so many different guys, whether it's standing up, hand in the dirt, moving them around. They have the big bodies, the length, and the athleticism. Why wouldn't Florida State be, with this coaching staff, there's a key. They actually know how to coach the 3-man front and move it back and forth to a 4-man. How in the world would I not project Florida State to be anything other than a top 25 defense? And that's probably light. Top 15 is where they should be. So let's break it down a little further and go into it. I'm going to give you multiple predictions today. Number one is going to be my depth chart at the end. I'm just going to list it. But there's going to be a lot of play. As I noted a moment ago, Florida State's going to run 3 and 4-man line. Prove me wrong. They may not even plan on doing that, but I'll be shocked if they don't, because James Williams can do so many different things. Amari Williams can do so many different things. It's almost like stealing. You might as well take it because it's right there for you. It's free. Go ahead and move those guys around so the opponent doesn't know how you're going to play from one snap to the other, even though you have the exact same personnel on the football field. That's such an advantage for the Noles. That being the case, I say this is the easy one. Darrell will start at nose. 6'6", 320, 330, whatever he ends up being, and that'll take care of itself through spring. They'll figure out what's best for Darrell and everybody else. That's not a friendly guy to have in front of you. Remember, this is his last year of college football. He did not grade out well. I was all over him on this pod because of how poorly he played up and down. Like, he'd make an incredible play, then he would just disappear. That ain't going to fly with the coaches that are now in Tallahassee. And if they can do it at Nebraska with not as many athletic bodies and big bodies, there's no way if they don't come in here and do a lot better. It would be a player problem to me, because the coaches, they were good at Syracuse. They were good at Nebraska. It's different talent at Florida State. So this is a player thing. I'm betting on Darrell to have a huge year and at least be in the conversation for All-American status. I don't know how that'll work out. That you get goofy writer things, coaches, it's weird, but he will be in that conversation and he will command double teams. Stats may not be great because sometimes he'll get doubled multiple plays in a row. You're not going to make a lot of plays, but he will open it up for anybody, Nicholson, whoever it is, at linebacker, Shane Brown, etc., coming down in the box from safety and change the defense. Again, Nebraska, first year that Coach White was there with that staff, 92 yards a game rushing. That's incredible. They gave up 189 the year before. Your roster doesn't change that much, but they knew how to coach it. And at the same time, Florida State, again, they really were lucky with all the big bodies. So I think KJ Sampson is the key as the backup at nose guard, because I think he will fluctuate between the hand in the dirt, strong side D end, in certain situations, short yardage with Darrell. You can't double team everybody. I think KJ will eventually play in this thing they call the National Football League. Very talented young man. This will be the breakout year for him. And the guy that gets no love, and this is hilarious, but he was way more efficient than Darrell Jackson. Daniel Lyons, he'll be a fourth-year junior. He only had 331 snaps last year, yet his statistics were better. 25 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, and 3 sacks, compared to 488 tackles or snaps for Darrell Jackson. He had 32 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, and 3.5 snaps. He had a whole bunch more. If Lyons would have got the same amount of tackle or snaps, where would he have been? He's the third or fourth guy in terms of like what perspective is, but he might be the best. I'm just saying that Darrell has the most talent, and I think he's going to be motivated. And the Florida State staff, Pot Roast, and all those guys, they know it starts with Big Darrell. If he's kicking butt at the nose position, or if they kick him out the strong side end, whatever, it's not going to be fun. And again, they will sometimes use him at the 3-tech in a 4-man line. Florida State's defensive front may not be number 1 in the nation this next year. I still need to see it go to a truly elite level to say that, okay, they're going to be top 5 nationally defensive against the run. It's possible, but it is first-year system. We'll have to see, and a lot of that will have to do with the linebackers filling correctly. That's the second part of this. We're going to get to that on Tuesday's podcast. Again, linebacker is a spot that is very different in a three-man line, so I need to get through this part first before we really get to linebacker. Just going to briefly mention them a little bit today, but KJ Sampson, Daniel Lyons, Deontay McCray coming over from Western Kentucky. That's a great kid that picked up. He's a kid out of Jacksonville transferring home. Very productive last year. He had 59 tackles. I don't care if you're playing at Western or not. 59 tackles for a D lineman is really good. He may or may not start. How many teams are going to have that? Florida State is in a really good spot. When we come back, I'm going to give my depth chart for the Florida State defensive front. And again, there's some caveat with this, and this is a blast. I love this stuff. It's fun to finally talk positive about Florida State football, and that is next here on Locked On Seminoles. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Let's talk Florida State defensive line depth chart. I'm going to do this in two segments because it's very unique, if you will. And I know there's going to be injuries and all that. So this is just pre-spring. We'll do this probably middle of the spring and after. Maybe even another if they add somebody from the portal. I doubt it, but there is, don't forget this now, there is a spring window for 10 days open, and then you could add somebody. So maybe Florida State loses a guy, adds a guy. We'll get to that later this spring. I want to start, though, with the three-man line. And then after that, I will talk about how I would use it as a four-man line. This kind of how they're going to start spring. This does not mean how it will finish. Keep that in mind. Florida State's coaches, they're going to play the best players. This is a no-nonsense group of coaches. I've heard really good things about them, and I'm excited to see it. So here we go. Nose guard again, Big Darrell. That's the easy one for me. At strong side end, I think it's going to be kind of a co-starter thing, but to begin, I like Daniel Lyons to be the starter. Maybe I'm wrong. I think Deontay McCray will be the other guy. They can rotate those players differently. They might move Daniel inside more. It depends on the following question. And this, I have no idea. Does Florida State run three-man line but want to run still a whole bunch of one gap and go stuff? Daniel is not quite as big a body in terms of his frame is what Darrell Jackson Jr. Darrell is just massive, and he could still move. That is a rare skill. Darrell can play any spot inside in a four or a three-man line. He's as rare as it gets in terms of a physical specimen. However, you need guys that can do different things. And while I think Darrell could kick out the strong side in, especially in rundown situations, like if you wanted to put Denise White in there, if you want to put Jamari White, however you wanted to do it, that's fine. I know Daniel Lyons could do it. 280 to 300-pound range, those big power, strong side ends to hold the run, protect the edge. Ward only knows Florida State needs more of that compared to last year. And occasionally, yes, beat his man and get to the QB. But they're going to be able to two-gap if they have Daniel in the game and Darrell in the game. That's something to watch as the season goes on this next year, and even in spring. You get to watch any of it, if you get to hear anything about it. If you're seeing more Daniel Lyons at strong side defensive end than other guys, again, he's over 290 unless he's really changed his body. That means FSU's probably going to two-gap more. You need big bodies, even at end. I think that's something to think about. But I think he will play both spots, and he could be your first guy off the bench. Hard to say. But the other concern there is whether or not you're going to have enough depth at nose guard. So I'm shocked that I'm saying this. Florida State's deepest spot on defense might be there. It's the rarest thing. Because when I first thought, okay, if they're going to have enough guys, and I go through, they got 4 or 5 guys. I want to signal that again. KJ Sampson, Daniel Lyons could certainly play it. Kevin Wynn, the freshman, rare player. Hopefully he gets to be brought along a little slower, and they move him back and forth between D-end and nose. We'll see. Jamari Flagg, Denace White. All of those guys will be battling, but right now I like KJ Sampson as the true backup, and Daniel Lyons will come in occasionally at nose. At the strong side spot, again, I like Daniel Lyons. I think McCray, the kid that transferred from Western Kentucky, is going to be a player. He's 280, 290 range, and he's productive. If you're going to take kids from the group of 5, and unless there's just something unusual, like the kid got banged up and he was a really late bloomer, you only take those kids unless they're productive. Again, he had 59 tackles last season. So that's my guy there at the strong side end. Don't forget about Jason Jenkins. This is hilarious. He didn't play a ton at Tennessee because they had pretty good D linemen, but he was somewhat effective for the limited snaps he had. He had 9 tackles, but 3.5 tackles for loss and 2 sacks. You can get another 6'6", 280 kid as your second or third string guy at strong side end. You've overachieved. And maybe he ends up starting. Again, that's what spring is for. But right now, I got him third. The weak side spot in the 3-man line is the hardest. Diamante Diggs comes over from Coastal, 6'5", 260. He's perfect for it. That's still hand in the dirt, but it's not a massive guy. A little more lateral quickness usually at that spot, and it's more about length. He fits it. But who's the backup? Do they use Daniel Lyons some there, go with the bigger guy part of the time? I don't know. Maybe James Williams plays there. They can book him up a little bit and put him in the dirt. But I like him as pass rusher. The only reason I see him playing that is just situationally, but we'll see. And the pass rusher, again, is the stand-up guy, like the old Lawrence Taylor spot. If they don't have him, it's because of Amari Williams. The kid who played tight end last year, wants his shot at defense. Amari was 220, 225, something like that as a freshman. I think he needs to bulk up. If he's not at least 240 in spring, I would see that as a sign that I don't know if he's going to be able to play much on defense. He might be better to stick at flex tight end. I don't know how his body's going to progress. Remember, he should be finishing up his his senior year of high school right now. He's only like 18 years old. They need to figure that out in spring. It's the wide open spot. If you have that stand-up guy and James Williams, is Amari able to give you 10 snaps a game, or are they going to move him there full-time? I don't know. It's the hardest spot to really guess. There are some other possibilities for Florida State at that position, but I really don't think it's easy to pick it right now. Aaron Hester, maybe he comes along. It'd be nice. Maybe somebody else moves there, but that is the weakest spot in terms of numbers. When you go 4-man line, it gets a little different. I think you can move Jason Jenkins inside to 3-tech, and in fact, that's where I would put him because that's 3 guys in the dirt that are more power guys with an end like a James Williams or a Amari Williams as your edge, your 7 technique. But you still need different guys in different spots. I think Darrell would play both D-tackle and nose guard, but about 50-50. To start at nose in that situation, I think there's a pretty good chance that KJ Sampson or Daniel Lyons would. I don't know which. I'm going to go with Daniel Lyons just because it's a little smaller, just go with quickness, and he's productive. He's proven it. KJ, I think, would be the first one. And Big Darrell, I would move to D-tackle to put him on a guard. That's just me. A lot of people would do it opposite. I'm good with it either way, but Darrell at nose guard is still a pain for the guy snapping the ball. That's a lot of human being coming at you after you hike the ball to the quarterback. So I get it either way, but right now I'm going to go with a guy that, again, I think is just really underrated. Daniel Lyons is the starter. Then I would put KJ right behind him, and I put Darrell in a more of a situation he'd get more single blocks. At the guard, that's why. I don't think many guys, when he's motivated, especially in a passing situation, can handle Darrell. If he's motivated this year, you're talking 7-8 sacks and getting after it. The strong side end becomes a wild situation because you're going to have Kevin Wynn who could play it in it or something like that as a freshman in goal line or something like that, but they don't need any of that help because they got plenty of guys there too, and you're just trying to find ways for Kevin to get in the game. I just put him behind Darrell and just let him go as a pure 3-tech in a 4-man line. That's just me. And then it doesn't change a whole lot with the strong side defensive end and a 3-man line. You could do it differently, but Deontay McCray, I think he would be great at it. Again, a veteran player, came over from Western Kentucky, and he's productive, 59 tackles. Diggs, you could move there. Depends, but I think he would also kick over to the other spot on the weak side. He would play both. I would start McCray, but Diggs would come off the bench. James Williams, he's got to be your weak side end in their 4-man line. They have so many different options because James could also, if you wanted him to, move over to strong side on 3rd and 7. It's not going to matter much because he's going. Think about this. How many right tackles, whenever he gets lined up there, are going to be able to handle an athlete like James Williams? Not many. 6'6", 250, really quick twitch, and he's a motivated kid. This will be his 3rd year working with pot roast. Florida State could be really, really good up front. When we come back to finish up the show, I want to discuss how this changes how teams will have to attack Florida State and how, quite honestly, the Noles can dictate for a change to their opposition. That is next here on Locked On Seminoles. It will be fantastic to see Florida State dictate the pace on defense. The D-line is something I've talked about throughout this pod, and I do believe the depth, the talent, the size, the athleticism, all of it cultivated together will make Florida State a top 25 running defense. But you have to talk about it from a big box perspective. How does that help your pass defense? How does that help your linebackers and safeties? This is just big box perspective, and I'm not really going to get into specific players other than one guy, Shyheim Brown. He's coming back for one more season. If he is the guy that I think he can be, when he's consistent, when he's right, and be the leader in the back end of the defense for Coop and all those coaches that are working together to figure out who goes where, Florida State's defense is going to get picks. Raise your hand if you remember me, or maybe even yourself, talking about how Florida State just couldn't get picks last year, couldn't get turnovers. When you're in 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, and at best 3rd and 4s, over and over and over, that leads to more quarterbacks dropping back, quarterbacks getting hit, quarterbacks worrying about getting hit, quarterbacks dropping their eyes, quarterbacks using poor technique, and all of it leads to the same problem. Ball security won't be as good in the pocket, so there's going to be more fumbles, more chances at deflections. You got Darrell, Daniel, guys that are 6'3" to 6'6" in the middle coming at you. You'll have James Williams, another 6'6" guy. You have all this length. You're going to see more deflections. So if Shyheim Brown and the secondary is right, Quindarius and those guys back there, I think he's going to have a huge year too. We'll get to him in a couple of days. Florida State's defense could at least, let's just start from a conference perspective, end up in the top 5 in the ACC in turnovers, if not number 1 or 2. I think they're going to lead the league in deflections in the front 7. I'm not talking about how the secondary does. I'm just talking about the front 7. Florida State's depth and length on the defensive line and their ability to shift. They start out in a 3-man. When the quarterback gets behind center, they shift, doing different things that confuse the quarterback before the ball is even in play will lead to Florida State causing a lot of havoc. This is why I love football. The chess match between one team's offensive coordinator and Florida State's defensive staff will be really intriguing. Now, I know they open up with Bama, and make no mistake, Bama's offensive staff is tremendous. They will do everything in their power to keep the ball out of the middle of the field. They're going to throw to the perimeter 85% of the time and see if they can do things. They're going to try to mitigate what I've just talked about throughout this entire podcast. And if it's super successful, a little bit of what I'm talking about will go away. But Bama's got an offensive line. They can at least run the ball some against Florida State, and they'll figure out quarterback. Kalen DeBoer, I have confidence in that. It's their defensive side I'm not so sure about. But what can Florida State do in conjunction with all of the moving parts? They can also disguise coverages more. When you're in 3rd and longs, the defense gets to dictate. Even against Florida or against Alabama, Florida State will be able to do that some. Alabama can run the ball. They have too many good players to say they got Proctor at left tackle, etc. They got some players. But they're not going to be in the same situation they would have against this last team. It will be more motivated, it's deeper, and the personnel fits what Pot Roast and all the defensive staff want to do. It's just different. It's shocking. I'm not going to lie. It's shocking. Most teams, again, that go from 4 to 3-man fronts usually suck because they don't have a nose guard. Florida State's loaded at nose guard. Potentially speaking, they got guys that are going to rotate back and forth between 3-tech and a 4-man line and strong side defensive end when they go 3-man and mixing it in with the 1-tech or nose guard. When you got guys that can play zero, a true zero nose guard that are capable of moving around from an athletic standpoint, and then you get an established coach, put him in there in charge of it. Coach White, Terrance Knighton, Pot Roast. I love that nickname, by the way. When Terrance Knighton is motivating those kids, I think it's going to be a total game changer. Again, to finish up, Florida State, if you take nothing else from this podcast, because of the defensive front, because of all the things they can do, and it's proven, no offense to Nebraska, they're not Florida State in terms of what they have personnel-wise. There is zero excuse for Florida State not to have a top 25 rushing defense this next season. I'm going to go out and say now, barring a massive number of injuries, they will be top 15. We'll see if I'm right or wrong, but that's what I think. If Florida State struggles, as much as I hate to do this, because I'd rather blame adults and people who have been out in the real world more, but this defensive staff is really good. It's going to be more of a player problem and or injuries. The Noles should be really good up front, and I'm excited to cover it. You should be too, as fans, just thinking about Florida State. Okay, we can finally kind of pump our chest out a little bit. We may not be unbelievable next year, but you got to have a starting point. If you slow down the run consistently and don't get gassed like Florida State did last year, oftentimes they were pretty good, but they'd have 2 just horrendous plays. And then you look at the box score and it's, okay, they averaged 6 yards a carry against, well, 2 carries went for 75 yards. And that killed them. I think those will go by the wayside. And Florida State will be a vastly improved rushing defense. When we talk tomorrow on Locked On Seminoles and come back, I'm going to get that rocking and rolling again. It's going to be an extension of this, talking about linebackers and the secondary, some of the things they can do with the coverages. I mentioned that. I'm looking forward to this. I need to study it more and go into it, but I really need to see it in the season because they might adjust quite a bit with their personnel. So we're just going to talk about possibilities. If you like scheme, if you like understanding what Florida State is going to be capable of, tomorrow's podcast is going to be a lot of fun too. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. Hit that like button, that notification bell, and subscribe. And if all else fails, why don't you just go ahead and share this podcast so I can get in front of more Florida State fans. Everybody have a good one. I will see you again on Tuesday.